They say your wedding day is supposed to be the happiest day of your life. Mine was the day my life split in half. I still remembered the feel of the lace on my wrists, the way the pearl necklace lay against my skin, the soft hum of voices in the small city hall we'd rented. Our mid-sized city didn't have anything fancy, but the old wooden beams, fairy lights, and white folding chairs made it feel cozy, intimate, ours. John stood a few feet away, laughing with his best friend. He wore a simple dark suit that fit a little too snug around the shoulders because his life was mostly work and bedtime stories, not gym memberships. The way he looked at me when our eyes met, like he couldn't believe I was real, made something inside me unclench, like a fist that had been gripping my heart for 3 years. Molly and Matthew, both 4, chased each other between the rows of chairs. She was in a pink tulle dress and tiny white shoes. He was in suspenders and a crooked bow tie I'd adjusted twice already. They were giggling so hard the priest smiled when he looked at them. My son, his daughter, our almost family. I didn't have butterflies. I had something better, a quiet, steady warmth, the kind you only get after you've been frozen for a long, long time. The priest cleared his throat, raised his hands slightly. People began to sit. John walked toward me, eyes locked on mine, that soft, crooked smile on his face. He reached out and took my hand. His fingers were warm, a little rough, familiar. I thought, this is it. This is the moment I finally get a second chance. He squeezed my hand as the priest started talking about love and commitment and how sometimes life breaks us before it rebuilds us. I let the words wash over me like background music. All I could think about was John picking up Molly in his arms when she cried, John tying Matthew's shoes when I was juggling cereal bowls, John kissing my forehead when I didn't know how I'd survive another day of grief and guilt. This was right. This was safe. This was earned. Then I heard it. A sharp inhale, then another. Then the unmistakable sound of glass shattering on tile. Every head in the room turned toward the back. Even the priest fell silent mid-sentence. I felt the blood drain from my face before I even turned. My heart knew before my eyes did. I turned anyway. And there he was, Eric, my husband. The man the army had listed as missing in action in the Middle East 3 years ago. The man I'd buried in my heart. He stood in the doorway like a ghost that hadn't realized he was dead yet. He was wearing his uniform, the same desert camouflage he'd worn the day he left. It hung looser on him now, like his body had shrunk inside it. His cheeks were hollow, his beard patchy and rough, his skin the color of old paper. There were fine lines etched around his eyes that hadn't been there when he left. His eyes. Those were the same, except older, harder, brighter and emptier at the same time. My bouquet slipped from my fingers. White flowers hit the ground in a soft, stupid little thud. Abigail. His voice cracked like it wasn't used to speaking. I'm sorry, I couldn't call or write. I was in captivity. No one knew I was alive. Someone gasped again. Somebody whispered, "Oh my God." Molly grabbed onto John's leg. Matthew stared at the man in the doorway with wide eyes, then panicked and hid behind John's back. Eric saw that, and I watched his heart break on his face in real time. He took half a step forward, then stopped. His gaze dropped to the floor. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I ruined this. I shouldn't have come. I'll leave." He turned, and that was when my body finally remembered how to move. "Eric!" I stumbled down the aisle, grabbing the skirt of my dress, my veil catching on a chair. Behind me, the priest said something I didn't hear. John didn't say anything at all. I followed my husband, the one I thought was dead, into the hallway. And that's when my story really began. If you'd told me in college that this would be my life, I'd have laughed. Back then, I was just a girl in oversized sweatshirts at a mid-sized city university, juggling classes, shifts at the campus cafe, and big, vague dreams. Eric was the loud one on the local football team. Funny, impulsive, the kind of guy who could walk into a room and somehow everyone already knew him. We met when he spilled an entire protein shake on my laptop. I just killed your thesis, didn't I? He'd said, horrified, grabbing napkins. You murdered it, I'd replied, trying not to cry and laugh at the same time. He spent the next 3 hours helping me retype notes from printed pages and promised me a lifetime of free coffee as repayment. He kept the promise, and then some. He was a leader, always. People followed him, trusted him. When he announced he was joining the army after graduation, nobody was surprised. It's my calling, he said. I want to do something that matters. I joked once, if I didn't love you so much, I'd never marry you. You talk more about the army than anything else. He grinned, kissed my forehead, and said, You'll always come first, Abby. I promise. I believed him. We got married young. We didn't have much, but we had plans. A small house, maybe 2 kids, me working at a local hospital as admin, him doing his tours, and then something easier later. Then Matthew was born. Then the world changed. When Matthew was a few months old, Eric got deployed to the Middle East. It was supposed to be dangerous, yes, but structured, calculated. We had countdown apps on our phones. He sent videos when he could. I touched my necklace every time his name popped up on the screen, and then one day, 2 men in uniform knocked on my door. Mrs. Collins? Yes? We're here about your husband. The words missing in action sounded unreal. Not dead, not alive. Just gone. Locked in some horrible in-between state that didn't let me grieve and didn't let me hope properly either. For months, I lived in limbo. I fed Matthew, worked whatever shifts I could, cried in the shower, touched my necklace so often the chain left a faint red mark on my skin. Every unknown number on my phone made my heart jump. Nobody called. Nobody found anything. Eventually, the official tone of the updates turned into quiet resignation. People started gently saying, You have to move on. But nobody knew how. The call from the lawyer came on a Tuesday that smelled like baby cereal and cheap coffee. Is this Abigail Collins? A calm voice asked. Yes. My name is Mark Harris. I'm calling regarding the estate of Ruth Lowell. I think you have the wrong number, I said. I don't know any Ruth. She was your grandmother's sister, he cut in, on your mother's side. She passed away and named you as her sole heir. You're her closest living relative. I remembered my grandma talking vaguely about a sister who moved away and never liked family gatherings. But that was it. We'd never met. She wasn't on social media, never sent birthday cards. She was a ghost in family stories. Okay, I said slowly. But what estate? Like a house? Furniture? There was a pause. Mrs. Collins, he said gently. Your great-aunt left you approximately $2 million in liquid assets plus some minor property we're arranging to sell. I sat down on the kitchen floor so fast I banged my elbow against the fridge. Matthew clapped, thinking I was playing. 2 million? I repeated. Yes, ma'am. It didn't feel real. My rent was late. I was stretching baby formula, cutting coupons, counting every dollar. 2 million wasn't a number for someone like me. It belonged to movies and people who said things like, my portfolio. I spent weeks in a fog of paperwork, signatures, meetings. The money hit my account and the numbers didn't look real. It was like opening your banking app and seeing a cheat code. I didn't go buy a sports car or designer bags. I paid off debt. I stocked the fridge without anxiety. I bought Matthew a better car seat and enrolled him in a nicer preschool program. And for the first time since the army men came to my door, I let myself breathe. I also did something I hadn't allowed myself to do before. I took it as a sign. I told myself, the universe just gave you a second chance at life. You survived the worst. You don't have to live in permanent grief. You can give Matthew more than just a mom who cries in the bathroom. It was around that time I started thinking what everyone had been saying in whispers. Matthew needs a father. That thought terrified me. But it also wouldn't leave. I didn't decide lightly. I stared at the sign-up page of a dating app for 3 nights before I made an account. Profile picture. A simple one. Me in a denim jacket, tired eyes but a small smile. Bio, widow, single mom. Not looking for a hero, just someone kind. I couldn't quite write, "My husband is missing in action." It felt like cheating fate. I told myself I'd just try. Just see. If it felt wrong, I'd delete it. The first man I met talked for an hour straight about crypto, never once asked about Matthew. When I mentioned I had a son, he said, "That's brave. I usually prefer, you know, less baggage." The second man was charming in that polished plastic way. He asked where I worked, then where I lived, then casually, "So do you rent or own?" When I mentioned stupidly that I'd recently gotten an inheritance, his eyes lit up in a way that made my stomach churn. "Oh, wow," he'd said. "That's convenient. Must feel great not having to worry about money anymore, huh? I mean, we could travel, invest, build something big together." We, after 30 minutes, I blocked him that night. Some dates were just awkward, some were boring. One guy spent half the time complaining about his ex-wife so viciously I wanted to send her an apology fruit basket. One man suggested I put Matthew in daycare more often so I could actually have a life. I almost deleted the app. I told myself I'd focus only on Matthew, on our future, on school and parks and building a stable life with the money I'd been given. But something stubborn inside me whispered, "Give it one more chance." So when a new notification popped up, new message from John W., I almost ignored it. His first line was simple. "Hi, Abigail. I wasn't sure what to write because your profile actually made me nervous. You seem like a real person, and I haven't seen many of those on here." No cheesy pickup line, no "hey gorgeous," just that. His profile picture showed a man in his 30s holding a little girl on his shoulders, both mid-laugh. His bio read, "Single dad, widower, good at pancakes, bad at small talk." Looking for something real, slowly. Something inside me said very clearly, "Pay attention." Our first date wasn't even really a date. It was a coffee in a crowded cafe with both kids, because he insisted he didn't want me to have to find a babysitter. "This is Molly," he said, helping his daughter out of her tiny coat. She had big brown eyes, a button nose, and the clingiest arms I'd ever seen. She wrapped them around his neck and refused to let go for the first 15 minutes. "And this is Matthew," I said, lifting my son onto the chair next to me. The two kids just stared at each other for a while. Then Molly slid half of her cookie onto Matthew's napkin. "Can I have pink juice?" she asked John. "Like him?" John smiled. "Sure, bug." He was soft and playful, but a little chaotic. He forgot wipes, dropped his keys twice, and spent half the time apologizing because Molly needed to go to the bathroom or wanted to sit on his lap or didn't like the straw. But every time she called "Daddy," he answered like it was the first time he'd heard it. His eyes, though, they had that same hollowed-out part I recognized from my own reflection. Like someone had taken a spoon and scooped out a piece. His wife had died in a car accident 2 years earlier. He told me quietly, fingers around his coffee cup, eyes on the table. "One minute we were arguing about what to have for dinner," he said. "The next minute, she was gone." He didn't say widower like a label. He said it like a wound. We didn't talk about my husband much that first time, just that he'd gone to war and didn't come back. Saying more felt like inviting the universe to change the story again. We met again and again, sometimes with kids, sometimes without. He had a good job in tech at a small local company. He was comfortable but not showy about money. He never once asked what I earned, never once hinted at my inheritance even after I mentioned it in passing one night, just to see. "What matters is that you and Matthew are okay," he'd said simply. "I'm glad you have one less thing to worry about." We didn't fall in love overnight. It was slower, more cautious than with Eric. We'd both loved and lost. We both had small humans watching our every move, but little by little my mornings started to feel less heavy. Little by little, the space next to me on the couch didn't feel so permanently empty. The kids became inseparable. Molly was clingy and funny, a little ball of sunshine stuck permanently to someone's leg. She called Matthew Matt and bossed him around kindly. He adored her. Sometimes I'd watch John kneel to tie Molly's shoe or tuck her hair behind her ear, and I'd think, I want my son to have this. I want him to see what a good father looks like. And yes, I wanted it too. The steady presence, the soft jokes, the way John always noticed when I was overwhelmed and wordlessly took over bedtime stories. After a year, when John asked if Matthew and I would consider moving in, it didn't feel rushed. It felt like the next step in a journey we'd been walking together, one careful step at a time. John's house wasn't fancy, but it was filled with life. Crayon drawings on the fridge, a couch with a suspicious stain from the time Molly poured juice on it, shoes in the hallway, photos of his late wife still on a few shelves, not hidden, just there, part of their story. The first night I slept there with Matthew in the next room, I lay awake listening to the faint sound of John reading 2 different bedtime stories at once, one for each kid, alternating pages, doing terrible character voices. I felt safe. It had been a long time. One morning, a few months into living together, we were all sitting at the small kitchen table. The sunlight was slanting in just right, making dust dance in the air. I was pouring cereal. John was looking for his keys again. "Daddy, I want more milk," Molly said, pushing her bowl toward me instead of John. "Mom, can you give me?" She said it so casually. No big dramatic pause. No realization. Just, "Mom." My hand froze on the milk carton. John stopped rustling through the drawer. I don't know why I started crying. I just did. Quiet tears pouring down my face before I even knew they were coming. "Yes, honey," I managed. "Of course." I poured her milk, hands shaking so much some spilled on the table. She giggled, wiped it clumsily with her napkin. "Careful, Mommy," she said, like she'd been calling me that forever. John's eyes met mine over the kids' heads. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His eyes were glassy, too. He took the kids to kindergarten that morning like usual. I stayed to clean up, still wiping my cheeks every few minutes. 10 minutes after he left, the front door opened again. "Forget your phone?" I called. He walked in slowly, closed the door behind him, and leaned against it. His eyes were full of something I'd never seen so clear on his face before. "Today was the happiest morning of my life," he said quietly. "Seeing her call you Mom. Seeing you cry like that." My heart did that strange, expanding, shrinking thing again. I've been thinking about this for weeks," he continued, walking toward me. "But this morning it felt obvious." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Not velvet, not perfect, slightly dented on one side. Very him. "I know we've both been through hell," he said. "I know nothing is simple with us. But I also know I want to wake up next to you for the rest of my life. And I want these kids to grow up in one home with 2 parents who love them. Abigail, will you marry me?" He opened the box. The ring wasn't huge, wasn't flashy. Just a simple band with a small stone that caught the sunlight. "Yes," I whispered. I didn't even hesitate. He slid the ring onto my finger, then kissed me. I buried my face in his shoulder and thought, maybe the universe really did give me a second chance. I had no idea that universe was about to rip everything apart again. The wedding was small on purpose. We didn't need grand gestures, just the people who mattered. My dress wasn't expensive. I still had most of the inheritance untouched, invested and safely sitting in accounts for houses and college funds, not for parties. I'd bought a modest car, paid off debts, and planned to buy a better house in a nicer school district. That was my idea of luxury now. When I walked down the aisle that day, holding a simple bouquet, my eyes were on John, not on the decorations or the guests or even the priest. He looked nervous and happy, fingers fidgeting with his cufflinks, smiling at me like I was a miracle. I'd been completely happy that morning. Well, almost. While doing my makeup, there was a brief moment when I remembered my first wedding, the one with Eric. I'd blinked away tears, telling myself they were just echoes, the past. Nothing more. I was wrong. Because now, standing in that hallway with my bouquet on the floor behind me and my missing husband in front of me, my entire past and present crashed together. Eric looked at me like he was afraid I'd disappear if he blinked. "I'm sorry," he repeated. "I didn't know how else to. I asked the army. They found your address. I needed to see you, and Matthew." I stepped closer, slowly, like approaching a wild animal. Then I broke. I threw my arms around him and he caught me, weakly, hands gripping my back like he was drowning. He smelled like sweat, antiseptic, and something metallic. Not like the old cologne I used to bury my face in. But beneath all that, there he was. The man I'd fallen in love with in college, the father of my child. I sobbed into his shoulder, my mind screaming, "This can't be real, this can't be real." Somewhere behind us in the wedding room I heard a child cry, "Molly." I pulled back, wiping my face. Eric's eyes were red. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, "for missing everything, for that little boy being afraid of me." He didn't finish. Footsteps echoed. We both turned. John stood there at the end of the hallway. His jaw clenched, eyes wet, chest rising and falling too fast. He looked at me, then at Eric, then at our joined hands. "I know you two need time," he said eventually, voice steady but low. "I'll ask everyone to leave. Take the kids home." I opened my mouth to say something, anything. But before I could, Eric snapped, "My son is not leaving with a stranger." The words hung in the air like a slap. John flinched. I saw it hit him, and I stood there like a coward, too stunned to speak. "I'll take Matthew," Eric said, straightening as much as his tired body could. We'll figure the rest out." In that moment, I watched John's heart break and his self-respect rise at the same time. "Okay," he said quietly. "I get it." He turned and walked back into the wedding room. I heard him say something about the ceremony being canceled, about everyone going home. There were murmurs, chairs scraping, whispered questions. 15 minutes later, Eric and I were in his old truck, Matthew in the back seat, clutching his stuffed dinosaur and quietly crying for John and Molly. I touched my necklace and tried very hard not to throw up. We drove to the house Eric and I had lived in before the war. The one with peeling paint and creaky steps I'd planned to sell to move somewhere better. Opening the door felt like stepping into a museum of a life that had ended. The couch where Eric and I had fallen asleep watching bad movies. The dent in the coffee table from when he'd dropped his helmet on it. I put Matthew down for his nap in his old room. He cried for John again, big, hiccuping sobs. "Where's John?" he asked. "Where's Molly? I want to go home." The word home broke me a little more. "Shh, baby," I whispered, stroking his hair. "Just sleep for now, okay? Mommy's here." When I stepped back into the hallway, Eric was leaning against the wall, staring at a picture of us on our wedding day. "You didn't show him pictures of me?" he asked quietly. He looked at me like I was a monster. My throat tightened. "He was a baby when you left, Eric," I said softly. "He was one when you were declared missing. I didn't know what to tell him. I didn't want to give him a dad in pictures just to have him gone." "So you gave him a new one instead?" he asked. The bitterness was subtle, but it was there. I flinched. "It wasn't like that." He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I'm sorry. That wasn't fair." We sat downstairs on the old sofa. He told me what he could about captivity. The details were vague, but I could fill in the blanks. A compound somewhere in the desert, long days, longer nights, very little food, no contact with the outside world. "What kept me alive," he said, staring at his hands, "was thinking about you and Matthew. I told myself every day, I have a wife and son waiting for me back home. If I let go of that, I'd have given up." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. At some point, he shifted off the couch and knelt in front of me. His knees cracked. "I know this is insane," he said, "and unfair, and I walked into your wedding for God's sake, but you're still my wife, Abigail. I never stopped loving you. Please, keep being my wife. Give me a chance to be your husband again, to be Matthew's father." Tears burned behind my eyes. He was the man I'd loved first, the father of my child. a soldier who had survived hell by holding on to my memory. John was the man who'd held me through grief, the man whose daughter called me mom, the one who'd shown me how to live again. I felt like someone had split my chest open and told me to choose which half of my heart to keep. I didn't choose that night. I couldn't. Eric went upstairs and slept in our old bed, exhausted. I lay on the sofa, staring at the ceiling, crying silently. At 3 a.m., Matthew woke up crying for John and Molly. I held him until he fell asleep again, my shirt wet with his tears and mine. At 6 a.m., my phone buzzed. "John, are you okay? I just need to know you're safe." My thumb hovered over the keyboard for a long time. Then I typed the sentence that changed everything. "I need time. I'm sorry. I'll call you when I'm ready." I hit send, put the phone face down, touched my necklace until my fingers hurt. Later that morning, after a few hours of pretending the world was normal, making toast, answering Matthew's questions with non-answers, my phone rang again. A number I didn't recognize, but with a military area code. "This is Abigail," I answered, heart racing. "Mrs. Collins," a calm female voice said. "My name is Dr. Patel. I'm the military psychologist who's been working with your husband during his debriefing and reintegration." I sat up straighter. Is everything okay? Did something happen?" No, he's physically safe," she reassured me. "I just wanted to talk to you briefly. Eric speaks about you and your son constantly. I thought it might help to give you some context about his mental state and what he'll need moving forward." We talked for almost an hour. She told me that Eric was one of the most mentally intact soldiers she'd seen after such extreme captivity. He had no psychotic breaks, no severe dissociation. He was oriented, functional, driven. "The main reason," she said, "is that he had a very strong mental anchor. You and your child. You were his why. He built an entire survival narrative around the idea of coming home to you. That narrative is what kept him alive when many others gave up." Her words felt like hands pressing down on my shoulders. "If he comes home to a reality where that anchor is gone or unstable," she continued gently, "the risk is that he may crash emotionally, depression, anxiety, possible self-destructive behavior. I'm not saying this to guilt you. You are not responsible for his trauma. But I want you to understand how central you are in his internal story." She gave me practical advice, too. Establish routines, go slow with big changes, involve him in daily tasks, avoid sudden confrontations. Let him parent, encourage therapy, be patient with nightmares, jumpiness, mood swings. "Reintegration is hardest when the soldier feels they no longer belong anywhere," she said. "The fact that he has a family is his biggest protective factor." When I hung up, my hands were shaking. I looked out the window. Eric was in the yard, trying to teach Matthew how to kick a ball. He laughed a little too loudly, flinched when a truck backfired in the distance, then tried to play it off. I realized then, if I walked away from him now, I wouldn't just be ending a marriage. I'd be pulling the last thread that had kept him alive through 3 years of hell. I thought of John, of Molly, of the morning she called me Mom. Then I thought of a broken man in the desert repeating our names over and over just to stay sane. In that moment, I made my choice. Not because it was easy, not because it was purely about love, but because I believed Eric wouldn't survive losing us on top of everything else. I chose my first husband, and I told myself it was the only moral thing to do. The next 6 months were a strange, fragile balancing act. I used part of the inheritance to stabilize our lives, paid off the old house, started plans to renovate or eventually move, made sure Matthew had a good preschool. I offered Eric financial safety, but money was complicated for him. "I should be providing," he said once, staring at the bank statement. "Not living off some relative's money?" "It's our family's money," I said gently. "And you are providing, just in different ways for now." Eric had nightmares almost every night, but tried to keep quiet. Sometimes I woke up to muffled gasps and found him sitting on the edge of the bed, drenched in sweat, staring at nothing. If a car backfired on the street, he jumped, shoulders tense, eyes scanning for threats that weren't there. But he tried so hard to look fine. He cracked jokes with the neighbors. He acted like nothing scared him. He was funny again, sometimes. He played superhero with Matthew in the yard, running around with an old towel as a cape. He insisted on making pancakes every Sunday badly because he'd forgotten how not to burn them. There were moments when it almost felt like before. Before war, before missing, before John. But there were cracks. He talked a lot about the guys, his unit, how some of them didn't make it back, how guilty he felt being alive, how he needed to do something more than just sit at home spending inherited money. I tried to be his anchor. I followed Dr. Patel's advice. I built routines, encouraged therapy, supported his slow attempts at part-time work. But some part of me was always aware of the shape of what was missing. A little girl with big brown eyes saying, "Mom." A man who was soft, steady, and emotionally present, not just physically there. Whenever we passed the park where John and I used to take the kids, I felt something twist inside me. I looked away. Eric didn't notice. 4 months in, I told myself, you just need more time. Healing takes time. 6 months in, I told myself the same thing, but the voice in my head sounded less convinced. One bright morning, when the air smelled like coffee and toast, Eric seemed lighter than usual. He hummed while making breakfast. He kissed my cheek, then my neck, lingering a little longer. "Remember our first kiss?" he asked suddenly. "At Lakeside Park. You had ketchup on your sleeve." I laughed. "You're the one who spilled it." "I want to go there today," he said. "Just you and me. Recreate it. Start fresh." Warmth bloomed in my chest. Maybe this was it. Maybe we were really getting there. I touched my necklace, smiling. "That would be nice," I said. "It'll help us get through the next months," he added casually, grabbing a cup. Something in me jolted. "What? Next months?" He hesitated. Then, "I've been talking to my CO. They need experienced guys back. It's just a 5-month contract this time. Then I'll be home for at least 6 months straight." I stared at him. My pulse roared in my ears. "You're going back?" I whispered. "Yes, No." I shook my head. "No, Eric. You barely just got home. You're still having nightmares. You flinch when a car backfires. You jump when someone drops a spoon. And you want to go back?" "They need me," he said. "My friends are still there." "We don't need money," I said desperately. "We have enough. You could start something here, any job, open a small business, work with veterans, anything." "It's not about money," he snapped. "It's who I am. I'm a soldier." "And what about being a father?" I asked, voice shaking. "What about being a husband?" He looked at me, jaw tight. "You're afraid you won't wait for me again, aren't you? Afraid that if I go back, you'll find another John?" The words hit me like a slap. "How can you say that?" I whispered. You know what happened. I thought you were dead, Eric." "But you weren't sure," he shot back. "You had doubt, and now you're scared of repeating that." "I get it." We argued for hours. About duty, about family, about survival and sacrifice and promises and fear. Underneath all the words, the truth sat there. Eric's first loyalty was to the army. Mine was to our child. Finally, exhausted, I said the thing I never thought I'd say. "You have to choose," I whispered. "Me and Matthew, or the army. I can't live through another 3 years of not knowing if you're alive or dead. I won't." He stared at me, eyes blazing with hurt and something like betrayal. "You don't understand." "I understand too well," I said softly. "I lived it." 2 weeks later, he left. "It's the last time," he promised at the door. "Please wait for me." "There is no last time with you in the army, Eric," I replied, tears streaming. "I'm sorry, I can't." He hugged Matthew so tightly the boy squealed. He hugged me less tightly. Then he walked away. This time, I didn't stand on the porch watching the sky, praying. I closed the door, sat on the floor, and finally admitted to myself that love isn't enough if you're never the priority. A few weeks later, I walked Matthew to kindergarten. It was a sunny day, one of those deceptively cheerful ones where the world looks fine even when your life isn't. On the way back, I passed the park, the one I'd avoided for 6 months. I don't know why I turned in. Maybe I wanted to punish myself. Maybe I wanted to see if it still hurt. Kids were playing, dogs were barking. Life was going on, indifferent. And then I saw him. John, sitting on a bench near the playground. Hands clasped, shoulders a little more hunched. He looked older somehow, sadness sitting in the corners of his mouth. My feet stopped moving. I thought maybe I was hallucinating, but then he looked up. Our eyes met, and everything I'd buried for half a year came rushing back. He stood slowly. Abigail? I opened my mouth to say something like hi or I'm sorry or how are you, but nothing came out. Instead, I started crying. Messy, ugly, uncontrollable. He walked toward me carefully, like I was something fragile. Is Matthew okay? He asked first. Yes, I managed. He's fine, I'm not. We sat on the bench together. For a long moment, we said nothing, just breathed. Then it all spilled out of me. How Eric had come back, how we'd gone to my old house, how I'd chosen him because I thought he wouldn't survive emotionally otherwise, how he'd decided to go back to the army anyway. You chose him, John said quietly. No bitterness, just truth. And he chose the army. I nodded, sobbing. I hurt you. I hurt Molly. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was, I don't know, being loyal, being good. But it feels like I just broke everyone and everything. He was silent for a while. I was angry, he admitted. Not just at you, at all of it, at life, at the fact that I finally let myself believe we could be happy again, and then... He gestured vaguely. I'm so sorry, I whispered. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but it's all I have. He looked at me, eyes soft and tired. Molly missed you, he said. For months, she asked when you and Matthew were coming home. I told her as gently as I could that you weren't. She cried herself to sleep for weeks. The guilt twisted in my gut. I don't expect her to forgive me, I said. I don't expect you to either, I needed you to know the truth. And I needed to tell you that if there's any chance, any at all, I want to spend the rest of my life trying to fix what I broke. He studied my face. I let him. I didn't try to hide. I'm not going to be your backup plan, he said finally. I can't do that to myself, or to Molly. You're not, I said firmly, surprising both of us. I chose Eric out of responsibility and guilt. I stayed because I thought he needed me to survive. But even with all that, he still chose the army in the end. You didn't leave. You stayed. You were the one who put family first. I see that clearly now. If you say no, I'll accept it. But if you say yes, it's not because there's no one else. It's because you are the one I want to build a life with. His throat bobbed. He looked away, blinking fast. Molly misses you and Matthew, he said quietly. And I miss you too. He turned back. I can't promise I won't have doubts sometimes. I can't promise this won't hurt again when I remember that day, but I can promise I'll try, if you're willing to do the work too. I nodded, tears streaming. I will, whatever it takes. He opened his arms. I leaned into him. It didn't feel like the first time we hugged. It felt heavier, older, more real. Coming back into their lives wasn't a montage of happy music and instant healing. It was messy. Molly didn't run into my arms the first time she saw me. She hid behind John's leg, peeking out with wide eyes. Hi, Bug, I said, voice trembling. I've missed you so much. She shrugged, not meeting my gaze. You left, she said simply. It cut deeper than any insult ever could. I did, I agreed. And I'm so sorry. You're right to be mad at me. She blinked, surprised by the lack of excuses. For weeks, I just showed up. I went to the park when John took her. I sat at the edge of her dance class. I drew with her at the table even when she refused to answer my questions. I listened. Slowly, bit by bit, her walls lowered. One night, months later, she climbed onto the couch next to me and leaned her head on my arm. "I'm not ready to call you Mom again," she said seriously. "But I want you to stay, if you promise you won't leave this time." Tears pricked my eyes. "I promise," I whispered. "I won't." Matthew adjusted too. He remembered life with John and Molly so strongly that it was almost seamless for him once we started spending time together again. But he also talked about Eric. "Can I call Daddy Eric?" he asked one evening. "He said he's going to send me a toy from far away." "Yes, baby," I said. "Of course." Eric stayed in Matthew's life as a distant father. He called regularly, sent small gifts, visited when he could. We kept our conversations polite, focused on our son. There was no romantic tension, no big fights. Just two people who once loved each other deeply, now standing on opposite sides of choices they couldn't unmake. At some point, he said on the phone, "I'm glad he has John. He sounds happy." "He is," I said softly. "Good," Eric replied. That's what matters." There was pain in his voice, but also a strange peace. He had his calling. I had mine. John and I rebuilt us slowly. No big proposal this time, no quick wedding, just days and weeks and months of choosing each other. He was patient but not naive. If I flinched when someone mentioned the army, he noticed. If I went quiet after a call from Eric, he didn't push, but he stayed close. We went to couples therapy, talked about loyalty, fear, abandonment, grief, talked about what it means to choose someone fully when life has already shown you how fragile everything is. We didn't need a ceremony to prove anything. But one evening, as we were putting away groceries and the kids were playing in the living room, he slid my old ring box across the counter. "If you're ready," he said simply, "we can start planning again. Something small, or not at all. You're already my family. I just want you to feel like it too." I opened the box, the same simple ring. My fingers shook as I picked it up. "I'm ready," I said. This time, the words tasted like truth. Our life now isn't a perfect fairy tale. It's better than that. It's real. Matthew has two dads. One who calls from faraway places, telling stories about when Daddy was young. One who packs his lunch and stands at the fence during school soccer games, cheering too loudly. Molly doesn't call me Mom all the time. Sometimes I'm Abby, sometimes I'm Mom, sometimes I'm just, "Hey you." Every time she chooses the M word, my heart still flips. She once said very seriously, "You hurt us, but you're trying really hard now. That's why I still love you." We had a small ceremony in the backyard one summer evening. Just the kids, a few close friends, fairy lights strung between trees. No big dress this time, just a white sundress and bare feet in the grass. John looked at me like he had that first morning Molly called me Mom, but this time there was something else in his eyes. Trust. Hard-earned, slightly scarred, but there. I still touch my necklace when I'm stressed. Some habits never go away. But now when I touch it, I don't think of a man lost in the desert clinging to my memory. I think of everything that's happened since. Of the ways life can break you twice and still give you something worth staying for. Sometimes, late at night, I sit on the porch with a cup of tea, listening to the kids' laughter echo faintly from their rooms, and I think about all the versions of me that had to die for this one to exist. The young girl in college who believed love always meant sacrifice, the new wife who thought devotion to the army was just a phase, the half-widow who lived in limbo for years, the woman who chose out of guilt and fear, the bride whose wedding was interrupted by a ghost. They're all still inside me. But so is the woman who finally learned this. We all make wrong choices. Some of them hurt people we love. Some of them hurt us. But if we're brave enough to admit we were wrong, if we're willing to do the work, to apologize, to rebuild, to show up over and over again, sometimes life gives us a second chance, not to erase the pain, but to turn it into something that makes us softer, wiser, and more capable of loving right. My name is Abigail. I lost my husband to war, then to his calling. I almost lost the man who showed me how to live again. And this is the story of how I ruined my own wedding, and still found a way to build a family out of all the broken pieces.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and explore our channel for more love, betrayal, and redemption tales.